Hi, I'm Dr. Dan Ratner. As part of our Mind-Body Connection series, we'll continue to look more deeply at the three columns and their corresponding action steps. Today we will be exploring how to live with the three columns, when to run through them, when they may be more dormant, and how to fall into a more automatic pattern with them by understanding their function and required everyday setup in this more general sense. If you haven't already, click subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, hit like if you like what you're hearing, and put your comments below and we will get back to you personally. And finally, you can reserve your place in one of my seminars or purchase any of my mind-body guides, also known as the PDFs, at www.crushingdoubt.org. Now, without further ado, here is a look at how to sit with the columns each day. In preparing these podcasts, one of the things I factor in is your questions. After all, I do say that the answers always come from questions, and this community asks lots of good ones. Which reminds me, if any of you have questions or ideas for podcast episodes, I'm always open to them. It is our living, breathing community that helps me mold my system more and more in directions that can help more people with a greater variety of issues. Whenever I come upon something that simplifies how to understand my system and how to build your system within my system, I know that it will be worth it to you all to hear about, since the question how is the one in everyone's minds. One of the things I came to realize in talking with a friend of mine, who is also a pain sufferer, is that it can be helpful to have a sort of shorthand about the columns and the ways we can use them, generally speaking. How did I come to the answer? Simply by talking to her and thinking about it. I thought about what I'd do, and then took the part that would be generalizable to tell her what she can do to think about it in the easiest light. What follows here is the way to think about how to use the three columns. Thankfully, what came out of that discussion was not very complicated, but even summed it up nicely for me. On a day-in, day-out basis, what is it I am doing with these columns? Let me explain how I think about each column and the general rules I use to have them operate smoothly and clearly. In the mind-body community, we all hear about almost nothing else besides the emotions and how they cause symptoms. It's not that this is wrong, because that is a major part of the cause, of course. But I help to identify that this type of work is largely to be employed with the onset and upticks of symptoms. This is not only a helpful rule of thumb, in addition to being accurate, but it also sheds light on how the emotions column should be used. When it comes down to it, a simple if-then statement can be quite clarifying. If the emotions column is used for the onset and uptick in symptoms, shouldn't it be the case that we really aren't always using the emotions column? Bingo! That's exactly right. You do not need to be using your emotions column in any situation where there's not an onset or uptick in a symptom. The emotions column, and its 6 to 10 themes or so that help you to do the detective work of finding out what caused the onset or uptick of the symptom, is never needed for mind-body purposes when nothing is going on. The column lies essentially dormant with its static information and can be flipped on like a light switch the instant it is needed. Don't get me wrong, you are going to want to think about your emotional themes a lot so that you're thinking emotionally and continuing to learn about yourself and grow. But it is sporadic and only needs to be activated when acute symptoms come on. For me, this is multiple times a day, by the way. So I don't mean that the emotions column isn't on very often. I just mean it is on and off all day long, depending on whether or not it is needed. If there is an acute symptom, you flip the switch on and start looking at the clues. But otherwise, once you've developed those themes and know them, you really don't need to think about them much for your mental health and sanity maybe, but not for your symptoms. To me, that's really interesting to find that that is the case, because so much of the mind-body world keeps telling us, just keep looking for that feeling. But it isn't the emotions that drive the bulk of the symptoms, and aside from the onset and uptick of symptoms, doubt is the driving factor. It is the doubt column that must always be on, guarding against doubt creeping back in, as it will try to do every second of every day, and in creative, nuanced, subtle, and highly varied ways. The way I think about it, the doubt column, if it had a switch, would always be in the on position, but on a low hum. What I mean by this is that you do not have to have doubt in the front and center of your mind all the time, but you also must not forget about it at any point, or doubt will pounce. We cannot live well if we are always stuck on the same task, and that task takes up too much space of our brain. So I don't want the doubt column to become that for you. And that is why we have to learn to have the doubt column on, but not in an especially active sort of way most of the time. That's that low hum I'm talking about. When a consistently acute symptom returns, or isn't moving much, we might then turn it up from a low hum to a laser-focused search through doubt. Now remember, when I say a consistently acute symptom, that's my wording for what used to be chronic, but I'm really moving away from that word because it feeds doubt. So think of doubt as always on, mostly just keeping it in your conscious awareness as a possible threat, and then being sprung into action in just the same way the emotions column was for onsets and upticks. When you find doubt, activate the column all the more. But the difference with the emotions column is that the emotions column can truly be left in the off position much of the time. Now this brings me to the power column, which I have seen become more and more important as I think about what helps with symptoms. Why is that? Because the power column not only is another place to raise questions and get answers, but it is also the solution to many of the conundrums in the other two columns. The power column is the column that is supposed to be on all the time and in high gear at that. Many of you have heard me say to live in the power column. This is what I mean by that. The power column is the column to spend the bulk of your time and energy thinking about. The emotions column has largely been settled once you have your themes, and it is an incredibly powerful tool when onsets and upticks occur, but it does not require much thought beyond that. The doubt column needs to be on all the time to be vigilant for doubt, but you don't have to think very specifically about it much of the time when symptoms aren't raging in that consistently acute sort of way. But with respect to the power column, there's absolutely no harm in having it on all the time. The benefits of having it on are always excellent, and the incentive to have it on at its highest level is always the same because being powerful in your own internal sphere has no cost to anyone and only brings a gain to you. While the doubt column is on at a low hum, meaning that you never stop searching for doubt creeping in, but don't have to do much else with it in your average moment, the power column is always on high. What this means to have your power column on high is that you keep your core narrative and the ideas within it close to your everyday moment-to-moment experience. It also means that you are in a constant, eventually automatic and unobtrusive to the rest of your life, state of assessing what is happening with respect to your power with yourself, with others, and with your symptoms, and then making adjustments to return yourself to as powerful a position as you can get at each moment. So to review, the emotions column switch gets flipped on and off all day on an as-needed basis. The doubt column is always on at a low hum and gets flipped into high gear when needed. And the power column is always the central column that needs to be active, thriving, and in your conscious mind. Just remember to not obsessively use the column's work. Sometimes let it go and trust that your brain is integrating the system and will begin to do this all automatically. What I have just described here will become fairly automatic most of the time, so it isn't as much work as it may sound. But thinking about it in these general ways can help you feel confident that you know when to use each column. I really hope you enjoyed this episode on the automatic way you can fall into rhythm with the three columns through understanding better their function and way of operating. If you haven't already, click subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, hit like if you like what you're hearing, and put your comments below and we will get back to you personally.